Yeah.
I hope that's okay.
You can't dispute it. He took a picture. Make sure you always park the way you are parked now.
Oh,
Sammy, I will stop you 1 second before you put me on mute.
Okay.
There's a
Well,
noise.
if you need,
Yes.
I'm gonna help you. But right now, pay your
Vanim
ticket.
Ramon.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Look at Dorit's nose.
Mr. Butterfly.
For some reason, I'm very embarrassed to tell you that
Participants.
sure that I can
Click on
put
the
it-
participants, and then you have on the left mute all.
I mute
Been there,
myself.
mute everybody, and I'm the Zoom, and I started the Zoom, and for some reason I can't see it there.
Even when you click the
So we
participant.
will put ourselves in the mute.
So I would ask everybody, because I'm kind of my technological skills are not that great. I would ask everybody to put themselves on mute. Thank you. You know what they say now? I've heard that they call it listening mode. It's not mute anymore. So we're all in listening mode. Okay, ladies. So first of all, thank you so much, everybody. It's so great to see everybody here. I see familiar faces, which is great. I see some new faces, which is also great. And it's really, really, really great to have everybody aboard. Welcome. Everybody on mute, please on mute. Okay. Oh,
You know how to
if
mute?
I would know how to do it, co-host, it would be great.
Click on the 3 dots next to my name,
Okay, okay,
then make co-host.
okay. I can't see this option.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Something is wrong with my Zoom probably because I've done it many times before and it worked, I swear. Okay, now we're going to start. I'm just going to ask each and every one of you really to put herself on mute. Thank you. Okay, so for those of you who do not know me, my name is Tammy Levy, and I'm the IAC National Project Director of Vanim Ramon. Vanim Ramon is a year-long program that develops Israeli American and Jewish American women's leadership skills as they become community builders. Part of our year-long program is actually an 8-day trip to Israel, in which we partner with our amazing partners from Momentum. I'm going to read to you a few lines about Momentum. You're going to actually excuse me that I'm reading it, but as you all know, I work for the IAC and Momentum. I can't remember the description by heart. So Momentum was founded in 2009 when 8 diverse Jewish women from the DC area came together to make a difference in the world. Together, they created Momentum's flagship program, the Momentum Year-Long Journey. Since then, Momentum has partnered with more than 200 organizations for more than 30 countries, bringing over 20,000 Jewish individuals on the Momentum Year-Long Journey. Momentum has since expanded its offering, launching a series of new videos, podcasts, digital magazines, and webinars. So before I'm gonna formally introduce you to our legendary Adrienne Gold, I just want to share 2 things. The first thing, I'm gonna put in the chat soon the new IAC Home Facebook page. IAC Home is a new platform that the IAC started in those crazy days recently. They feature content for the entire family, for young children, for adults, for teens, for women, for everybody. They have really, really, really great things. I highly recommend to follow it and then to get all those messages about the great things they're featuring. What we're going to do right now, our great Adrienne is going to speak for about 40-45 minutes, and then we're going to open the discussion for questions. You're more than welcome to post questions in the chat, and then we're just I'm going to address you later when we're going to get to the questions. And now, with no further ado, I'm going to actually introduce you formally, though, because I'm not. Maybe one person doesn't know you, so they should all know you. So I want to introduce Adrienne formally. Adrienne was a Canadian television personality specializing in fashion, style, and beauty, as you can see, for almost 2 decades before becoming a senior lecturer and community liaison at the Village Shul in Toronto, as well as an international Jewish educator. Adrienne has appeared in all major Canadian television networks and has served as the event host for dozens of charities and organizations. Adrienne and her husband live in Toronto and have 2 sons. And from me to you, my love.
Thank you
You're
so
gonna
much.
take it from
Eva.
here.
It's wonderful to be with all of you. It's there's something very bittersweet about what's going on in the world right now. I feel like as disconnected as we are in a physical way, we've redoubled our efforts, all of us, to find a way to connect, because the human condition is such that what we want more than anything is connection. Hello, Sharona, you just popped up for me. Sorry, I was
Hi,
talking
Adrienne.
about you, my darling. That desire for connection, that need for connection is so profound and so natural in the human condition that somehow when these liberties are taken away from us, in some ways we work harder to find them. And while there's very little silver lining what's happening in the world right now, and I won't say that there's anything good about this. In fact, I think it's almost disrespectful to the world.
No, I don't want to go my
I
legs.
need you to press mute on your phone, love, okay? Sharona, all you have to do is press the little mute.
Adam, shh. Shh.
If everybody can mute themselves, please, Sharona, and if everybody can just mute themselves, thank you so much.
Awesome. I think it's arrogant. Assume that anyone knows what's going on, why things are happening the way they are. There are all kinds of trajectories that people are talking about, but this is not our purpose, and it's certainly not my purpose to discuss with you. What I want to talk about tonight, which is the strength and the power of the Jewish women in the history of the world and moving forward, is really represented in my necklace. I'm going to let you have a good look. Can you see it? This is a tambourine. This is the symbol of Miriam's tambourine. I bought it in Jerusalem some years ago, and I love it. I want to talk about why the tambourine was the instrument that Miriam brought out of Egypt with her when she knew that we were going to leave this enslavement that we had in Egypt. What is it about a tambourine that's so extraordinary, and for our times, why is it so powerful? So if you consider it, typically a tambourine is an instrument of a piece of wood that's bent and curved into a circle. And then a skin is stretched across it, very, very taut. And then bells or timbrels are put on the exterior of it. The flesh or the skin that has to go across that tambourine has to be extremely tight. Otherwise, when you bang it, you get no sound. In other words, the tambourine, like most musical instruments, is a pressure instrument. If you consider a woodwind or a string instrument, with a woodwind, you know, you've got that narrow flute with the tiny holes in it, and you're compressing your lips against it, pushing air in, and then controlling with your fingers how much air comes out and in which scale. And if you consider the piano or the guitar or any other string instrument, the string is pulled very, very tight, and it's screwed in until it's at the right frequency that when you strum upon it, music will come out of it. And a drum is a perfect example of anything that has a tight pressure system at the top of it that you bang upon to get sound. Metaphorically speaking, in some ways, I think that the instrument is a perfect example, a perfect metaphor for what it means to live with grace under pressure, and what it means to be a Jewish woman in the history of our world, and what it means to make music with what you have. Pressure of all kinds can be extremely painful, and it can also be utterly productive and pleasurable. Some of the most pleasurable things that we experience have at their onset tremendous pain. 10 centimeters and dilated, your stomach stretched like a drum, and that's just the moment before birth. There are many examples. In fact, if I might be discreet here, the highest level of physical pleasure that a woman can feel is the result of everything pulling tight, 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 and then releasing. Tension in and of itself does not have to be a negative thing, especially if we can learn how to make music out of the tension that's around us. Now, all of us from across the country, depending on where you are, have differing degrees of struggle with what's going on in the world right now. This new plague that lines up, coincidentally or not, odd or God, with exactly the plague of the death of the firstborn that we learned when we were leaving Egypt. And do you know that that was the only plague that we had to stay locked in our houses for? All of the other plagues, if you remember the story, you know, if an Israelite was holding a glass of water and drinking from it, if the Egyptian took it from them, it turned into blood, but not for the Israelite. And all of the other plagues did not affect the Hebrew slaves, but this one plague, we had to be in quarantine. We were told to stay inside. And if you recall, we had to paint blood of the sacrificial lamb, which was the Egyptian god, and we had to paint it on the inside of the lintels of our doorposts. Inside. Why? As a reminder for us. And so we are going through a time in the world where things are stretched very tight. The level of tension is profound. I do 3 or 4 webinars a day, and people in their breakaway rooms are freaking out about lost jobs, lost income, you know, lack of shlom bayit, you know, not sure whether they're going to end up this situation, you know, at the end of it with any place to live. People are freaking out because of the delusion of control that we work through our lives with is no more than that. It's a delusion. This is a time where what we need more than anything, my friends, is courage. Now, courage, we know, is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something else is more important than your fear. I'm going to repeat that. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is the decision that something else is more important than fear. And our Jewish women leaders, from the very onset of our history, have taken their fear and that stretched tension of their lives and attached bells to it and made music from it and carried their tambourines because they knew that dawn was coming. And so for all of us, as we begin, let's try, at least for the next half an hour, to imagine that the sea is going to split and that things will return to a new normal. And our courage is the only thing we have control. Now, we come from a long line of spiritual DNA of bravery. And I want to begin right at the very onset with the very first Jewish woman who was brave and powerful beyond measure, and in fact was able to change in some ways the trajectory of the world. So we're talking, of course, about Miriam. Miriam was just a small girl, a 7-year-old girl, when her father, Amnon, who was the head of the whole coalition of the greatest of the most righteous of the men in the Hebrew encampment, decided to divorce her mother because of Pharaoh's decree that all of the boy babies would be tossed into the Nile, or worse yet, chopped up and used as mortar for the building of the storehouses. Yeah. And Miriam's father said, there's no purpose to this. In our marriages, children will come of this that are killed. And he divorces his wife, Yocheved. And Miriam, this little girl with the chutzpah that you need to stand up, turns to her father and says, you are worse than Paro, worse than Paro, because he's just dooming the boy babies and you're dooming the girls. And he was so struck by her clarity, so struck by how right she was, that he ultimately goes back and marries his wife. And from that generation, the women of the Hebrew encampment did an extraordinary thing. Their husbands would drop by the storehouses and the pyramids that they were building. After working 15, 18, 20 hours a day, they would drop in the fields. They had no interest in going home. They certainly had no libidos. But these women, they would take their copper mirrors and they would polish them and they would do what they had to do. They would pinch their cheeks. They would use the kohl in Egypt on their eyes, rouge their mouths. And they would go down to the fields where the men were lying and they would hold the mirror above their faces so that their husbands could see both them and him in it, like a cheap motel with the mirror on the ceiling. And they would hold it up and they'd say, look how beautiful I am. And in that way, they would entice them back into intimacy. So those women who knew that things were terrible and that a decree had been put out against their sons understood, as Jewish women always have, that we are nation builders, that as the role models in our family, we are nation builders. And a 7-year-old girl stood up to her father and said, dude, you are wrong. What you are doing here is Wutzipera. The mother reunites with the father. The other women go into the fields to seduce their men back into the marital bed. And from that generation of strong women came the birth of Moses. So let's take it a step further. So Moses is born. And of course, he's put in the pitch basket and sent down with him. She follows along with him in order to see what will be with him. And what happens next? Another courageous woman who is called Batya, the daughter of God, who was Pharaoh's daughter, who ultimately became a Jew, comes down to the wall and sees that baby. And we learn that she reached for that basket, which was beyond her reach, but by miraculous notion, her reach exceeded her grasp, and she pulls this baby she calls Moshe, which means drawn from the water, and she brings him in to raise under the nose of her father, the Pharaoh. And not only that, Miriam once again suggests a Hebrew wet nurse in order to have somebody to feed the baby, and goes to get her mother so that Moses is being fed by his mother right under the nose of Pharaoh. And this Jewish baby is born into this house. So we see Miriam moves mountains to ensure that continuity of family and nation building occurs. And then, of course, we know when it's time and we get to the banks of the sea and we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, Miriam has already brought with her her tambourine. And our sages ask all the time, you had to run out of Egypt so fast that you couldn't let your bread leaven, and we have to eat those dry crackers that, like, let my people go, literally, and our stomachs are in pain, and we're doing that for 8 days. But she had time to pack a musical instrument. And that's the second piece of wisdom here, is that Jewish women prepare for dawn. We know we will sing and we will dance. That's what it is to live as a pressure instrument. That the taut tension of the stress that's pulled across you, we are ensured that dawn will come. And then, well, let's talk about what happens next. After Miriam and Batya, we learn something that is mind-blowing. It is the first recorded instance of history of civil disobedience. Do you know what civil disobedience is? It's the refusal to obey an order. And in those days, that was given by the most powerful man in the most powerful empire of the ancient world, the Pharaoh, simply because it was immoral and unethical and inhuman. Shifra and Pua, we learned from some of our commentators who were the midwives, the Jewish midwives in Egypt, were Miriam and her mother Yocheved. And our Torah teaches us that they defied Pharaoh. They refused to kill the babies. And when she was summoned to the Pharaoh to explain their behavior, they said, listen, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. We're very vigorous. We give birth, and before the midwives arrive, they already have their babies. Without much fuss, they simply defy his order. And do you know that it took more than 3,000 years for what those two Jewish women did to become enshrined in international law? In fact, in 1946, the Nazi war criminals on trial at Nuremberg all offered up the defense that they were just obeying orders. I was just doing what I was told. I was saving my own life. Orders that were given by a constituted and democratically elected government. And it says that under the doctrine of national sovereignty, every government has the right to issue their own laws and order against its own affairs. And it took a new legal concept, like a crime against humanity, like the Shoah was, to establish the guilt and to put into law the very notion that some things are so morally repugnant that we must stand up against them. Civil disobedience is not the new Me Too movement, although it's on the rise again. It's not the Time's Up movement, although that certainly is moving us forward. It began in Genesis, in the genesis of the story of the world, that it was the Jewish women who said, I don't care if you're the king of the free world. We are not doing that, and we'll do whatever we have to do to ensure that we don't do that. This is a huge deal. This one Miriam, this prophetess, her mother, the rest of the Hebrew women who were part of this enslavement, all did whatever was necessary in order to ensure that life went on. It's exactly like was explained by the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto when he said, during these times we must be kiddush hachayim, we must sanctify life. That even when things are unpleasant and horrible, it is incumbent upon us to give charity, to help the homeless, to provide meals, to reach out to the elderly. The guilt that Tammy was talking about earlier of not being able to help your parents. This desire to give, to do what's right, is enshrined in your DNA. Better to feel a little guilt and horror than to feel nothing and no obligation. So let's move beyond just Miriam and Shifra and Pua and the idea of civil disobedience being something new, because we know, of course, that it's not. Let's take a look at the daughters of Zelophehad. Those daughters who went to Moses and said, it is not acceptable that Jewish women cannot inherit property, land, any of those things if there is no brother. And they went to Moses and they said to Moses, we don't think this is cool. And Moses goes to God and God says, these girls, these women are right. And that fundamental change, more progress for women in the first few chapters of our personal history was provoked by women. And you have that spiritual DNA. And from all the way back to Miriam and Yocheved Shifra and Pua, and all the way forward to Golda Meir, who we know was called the only woman in cabinet, the one who called the Secretary of State of the United States at the time, Henry Kissinger, and said, "You're Jewish, you have to help the land of Israel." And he said, "Oh, Golda, you're forgetting, you know, first I'm an American, and then I'm Secretary of State, and then I'm a Jew." And she said, "Well, you are forgetting that we read in the other direction in our country." And this energy, this holy chutzpah, is something that makes us able to summon up what we need to get through these times. So I'm just going to stop for a minute and breathe and go on to the next piece. Okay? Let's go back to courage and what it requires to really move through the world. In order to be brave, we first have to know what we're capable of. One of the things that this time of year will give you is the spiritual mazal, the flow of energy towards freedom, moving from being in a tight and constrained space. Mitzrayim, we know in Hebrew means narrow space, and moving into the liberation of the human. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be free? So if you ask your 8-year-old, to be free means to be able to watch TV all day and eat junk food all day and not have to go to school and do their homework. And if you ask your teenager, your 20-year-old, being free means to not have to listen to anything your parents say or do anything your parents say, and not to be beholden to them for money, to have your own space and your own place and to not need anything from them. And if you ask a person who's later on in years, what does freedom mean? It might be good health. It might be wisdom. It might be love. From a Jewish perspective, freedom is not defined as liberty or license or freedom from. It's defined as freedom to. Freedom to what? To express your highest possible self. To become the greatest you can be. And as a Jewish woman, you have within your spiritual DNA all of the raw materials that can help you pass from the narrow straits and to broaden. When we got to the banks of the sea, when we finally got out of Egypt, we were stuck there at the banks. And when we looked behind us, Pharaoh's army was chasing us with chariots and every manner of weapon. And in front of us is a sea that wouldn't split. And we, by nature, divided up quite naturally into 4 encampments, 4 kinds of people. And I think most people fall into them. Certainly most children do. The first encampment said, let's just go back. I've never met a conflict that I can live with. I'm not confrontational. I just like peace at any price. I'm not interested. I'm just going back. And the other group said, no, let's fight. We're going to fight till the death, because when you're a hammer, you think everything's a nail. You know, those people who for every single conflict, it's like, you're talking to me, the fists are up, they're ready to spoil for it. A third group started to pray on their knees, begging God to help them. And the fourth group said, let's just kill ourselves. We'll just drown ourselves. So I like to liken that in the modern day parlance of drowning ourselves the way we do today when we're stressed. I'll drown myself at the bottom of a bottle, you know, at the end of a big fat joint, at uh, 4 hours straight of Netflix, whatever else it is you do to kill time, to deaden your emotions, whatever that is. Now, you would think, because it's the Bible, the right thing to do would have been to pray, right? Like you're in Godland. You should have said, the group that we're praying should have been the right group. But God says to Moshe, you tell those people to stop praying. This is not a time for prayer. Now, I remember when Martin Luther King walked and Abraham Joshua Heschel walked with him. He said that he was praying with his feet. There are times for words and for looking up, and there are times for progressing and moving forward, for doing what is necessary. And what happened? No one would begin, except one guy called Nachshon from the tribe of Yehuda, which is where we're named after. And he walked into that sea, and it went past his ankles and past his knees and past his thighs and past his waist and past his chest, past his chin, over his mouth. And when it finally covered his nose and he had the sensation that he was drowning, at that moment, we learned that was when the Red Sea split. What's the message for us? The message for us is that often you will feel like you're drowning before the sea splits. Just like the most painful part of pregnancy is 10 centimeters and dilated, and then the baby comes. Just like the darkest moment of the night is 1 minute before dawn, so it is that the day begins at night, that there is confusion before there is clarity, that things are dark first and then let there be light. Jewish women have always known that the dawn was coming. We pack our tambourines and we sing a song at the sea because it does split for all of us. So what is freedom? Freedom is the ability to actualize your courage and your power as a woman. But we can't actualize something that we don't know we have. And you have it. It's in you. Even when you think there's nothing left, there's always a little bit more. This is how some mothers have lifted cars off a toddler that was trapped underneath it. Because the superhuman strength of the Jewish woman, our spiritual DNA, our power. Now I want to talk about a couple of other powerful role models. Let's look, for example, just for a minute at Yael. We learn about her in the book of Judges. We learn about the brave prophetess, Deborah, who guided the whole Jewish army to victory. We learn about Sisera, the defeated general that she took down. We learn about Ruth. Ruth, who was a Moabite princess, just like the rest of us. She grew up in the splendor of the palace, which is what North American society is, let's be honest. She married the son of a rich Jewish merchant, and they returned to Moab. But after her husband died, Naomi, her mother-in-law, told Ruth, go back to your family, move on with your life, return, go back. And Ruth said, no, famously, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Your God is my God. And of course, we know that she ended up with Boaz, and she became the paternal great-grandmother of King David. Here is a woman who came from the most extraordinary of backgrounds and came to become the predecessor of the greatest. And let's just go for a minute to Esther. I want to talk about Esther with you because Esther is my spirit animal, and I'm going to tell you why. When I worked in live television, which I did for many, many years, there's only like a 1 to 5 second delay. If you drop the F-bomb or you say something inappropriate, they've got 1 to 5 seconds to bleep you out when you're on live. Because in those days it wasn't digital, it was all movie cameras. So after September 11th, I remember feeling that I just didn't want to talk all the time about what handbag to wear with your shoes. I really didn't care as much as I used to. And it was interesting because my kids had started at a Jewish day school, and their rabbi was this incredibly brilliant woman, and used to come home, my boys used to come home with all of this wisdom. And my husband and I got interested in learning about Judaism. We were fascinated by it. And it started piquing both of our interests. Mostly it was our children and being able to help them with their homework that really made us want to start learning. And during the course of the summer, I took a class on Jewish women in the Bible because I was not interested in anything that I felt precluded female power. And I learned about Esther. And the thing that struck me the most about Esther was this. When Mordecai goes to her and says, go tell the king that you're a Jew and that your people need to be saved. And she says to him, if I do that, I haven't been called to him in over a month. If I go to him without being called, I could be killed, like off at the head. And he answers her in an interesting way. He says to her, Esther, whether you choose to do this or not, the Jewish people will be saved. We will be fine from some other way. But who knows whether it was for this moment you were placed in this palace. Esther faced an existential moment, or what I like to call her Esther moment, where she had to decide in that moment what was brave and what was more important than her fear. And of course we know she went, and the story turns out, of course, we dance and we wear costumes and we party. Why am I telling you this? Because the week of September 11th, it was already starting to be anti-Israel propaganda on the news show that I worked on. In fact, one of the anchors said, oh, look, they're dancing in the streets of Palestine, giving out candies. And I said, that's not Palestine, it's Israel. And they all kind of looked at me. I'm a fashion expert. That night, I got a call from the teacher who was teaching us about Judaism. And he said to me, Adrienne, or should I call you Esther? This is your moment. You need to start speaking up about the land of Israel and about being a Jew. I said, what does that got to do with what handbag he wears with these shoes? And what does that have to do with what clothing is in this season? And he said, you have to do it. You're on live television. I said, but I'll get fired. And he said, Esther, salvation will come to the Jewish people, but who knows if it was for that very reason that you're in the palace. This is your Esther moment. And I knew he was right. And from that day forward, I proceeded to commit career suicide. Every opportunity I could, I would say things and talk about things that were inappropriate, things that had nothing to do with fashion, things that were more about our people, our land. And eventually, by the end of February, when my contract was up, that was the end of that. But you know, your Esther moment doesn't have to be something huge. Your Esther moment is every time that you exercise the power and the courage to choose what is morally upright rather than what is easy. You know what's easy? It's easy to throw up your hands and say, what can I do? It's easy to say the times are terrible. I'm just hunkering down, and I will hunker down, but I'm not looking at anybody else. It's easy to get depressed. I'm not talking about clinical depression, God forbid. That has nothing to do with situation. It's easy to have your anxiety overtake you. But girls, look what we come from. Your inner Miriam, Yocheved, your inner Ruth, Yael, Devorah, all of those women are standing, and you are standing on their shoulders. Viktor Frankl says that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your ability to choose your response. In that response lies your growth and your freedom. I guess what I want to ask you to do during this difficult time, with the assistance of the flow of Mazal coming from the heavens, as we go through this time of leaving the narrows into expansion, as we are right on target with the plague where we had to stay inside to protect ourselves from the angel of death, things are very lined up. Choose one trait in yourself that is an inner Egypt that holds you back. Maybe it's rage, maybe it's screaming, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's laziness. I don't know what it is. For me, it's all of the above. But try and isolate that inner Egypt. And try and work every day a little tiny bit on lengthening the space between the thing that stimulates you to that negative trait and the response that you're going to give. That's where your freedom lies. And you have the spiritual DNA of a Jewish warrior. We learn in the Talmud that it was in the merit of Jewish women that we were redeemed from Egypt. And we learned that it's in the merit of the holy Jewish women that this world will be redeemed. We can do it. Seize your Esther moment. Take every hour of the day and check in with yourself. Live consciously. It's an act of freedom, and it's worth it. So that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. I believe it's exactly 8:45. And I would love to hear from you. Perhaps somebody wants to share with me what default position they would be in. Where would you be at the side of the sea? Would you be one of the fighters? Would you be one of the retreaters? Would you be one of the prayers? And tell me, what's your inner Egypt? And how can you shut that down and go to your promised land? Or maybe you just want to ask something about one of those women. Or maybe you just want to say hi. But please, unmute yourself and let's talk a little bit together. I want to hear your voices now. Frankly, I'm sick of the sound of my own.
Hi, Adrienne.
Oh, sweetheart. Hello.
I needed your energy. Thank you.
I'm so glad. You're outside. The weather's that nice?
No, this is just the painting behind me, but I do in
Oh.
walking 15 to 20,000 steps a day. I go for 3 walks a day.
Wow.
With my sanity.
Well, I think I walk 15 to 20,000 steps, but it's to the fridge and back. Candy cupboard and back. To the chocolate raisins and back.
Yeah, that too.
What are you going to work on this Pesach season? Are you going to think about which part of yourself be released? You don't have to share it, but think about it.
Okay, well, thank you.
Anyone else want to say hi?
Yes.
Yay, Tali!
First of all, Adrienne, I'm very touched by your words. It
Oh.
touched me in a very deep place. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank God.
And I want to share a comment, if not a question, with you. Many of us, the faces that I see in front of me are Israeli women that speaking your mind, being courageous is something that was kind of expected from us while living in Israel. And I personally feel that when you practice this trait
Over
here
here.
in America, you pay a price. And I am dealing with this price, and it changes my behavior. And I want to hear what you think about that, how the culture shape us in a way, and how we adjust to that.
Wow, that's a very profound statement. And I'm sure it's true. I mean, I've never minced my words. I think, you know, people think I'm from New York or I'm Israeli. I don't. I'm going to tell you what I honestly think. I think there's a difference between chutzpah, that's self-serving, and powerful energy that's coming from a place that's looking for the best common good. I think what people react to is not what we say or even how we say it, but the energy behind it. And, you know, being brash or brave or saying what's on your mind is only one part of it. But if a person feels that there's any agenda behind it, for example, I'll give you a very common example with children. Let's say you grew up in a household where nothing was fair. Your father preferred one sibling to you, your mother preferred your brother to you, and they got better presents or larger pieces of cake or that. And you swore that when you had children one day, you were going to make sure that everybody would get even. And so on your birthday, everybody got a birthday present. And when your mother was cutting the pie, she was cutting it practically with like a slide ruler. The child does not pick up on the slice of the pie. They pick up on the mother's anxiety around cutting the pie. I think that speaking your mind in North American culture is so fraught with anxiety for so many women because they've seen where it ends up, that they go into situations where they need to do that, and what's radiating off them is fear and anxiety. Now, I'm not implying in any way that that's your situation, and I don't know what your situation is or what happened or why. And I don't believe, I mean, I know you hear a lot of traditionalists say, oh, like the woman is the neck that turns the head. Yes, that's very nice, but not out in the work world. My feeling is when you work on your inner world, when you feel fully entitled, when you know that your goal is peace, when you know that you are working on the parts of your character that are unpleasant, but you are absolutely certain that you have a place at the table in life, people start to take you seriously. And that's why I suggest inner work first, because all the chutzpah in the world, if there's a piece of you that feels, it's like with your kids, you know, you have to be, I heard this story a few years ago. I'm not even sure if it's true. People say it's true, but I don't know if it's true. Apparently somebody was in Queens at a kosher grocery store. And right in front of them in line was an African-American woman and her son. And behind her was a very, very religious woman with like 8 kids following behind her. And the kid picked up a chocolate bar and he put it on the counter. He went, "Mommy, please." And the mother said, "Jerome, put it back." And he said, "Mommy, please." And she said, "Jerome, it's not kosher." And the kid picked it up and put it back. And the mother behind her says to her, "What was that?" And the woman said, "Well, I hear you people say it." And the kids put it down right away. So I used the same tone. I've heard that story so many times that it must be true. But the meta message of that story is when something is completely clear and a person knows they can't cut a hole in it, if there's a teeniest little pinprick with a child, they'll push and bug their way through it. But when something is clear, you are allergic to peanuts, you may not touch that. They're not going to eat peanuts. I think that so many of us women go into the workplace in North America feeling like we're disruptors. And it's true. It's why we have this Me Too movement now. Certainly, I worked in the movie industry. I know what it's like out there. I think those times are changing somewhat, but it has been my experience that when a human being, male or female, works really hard on their inner world to the point where they feel I am created in the image of my creator, I am holy and perfect and perfectly imperfect, what they put out into the world is more readily accepted. And if that doesn't work, there's always the HR department and a good lawsuit. I don't know what happened to you. Can you give me a little bit more information? Does that in any way answer or not even at all?
It does. It does. It's not a specific event that I was referring to. It's something that is on my mind for quite some time. But you did answer my question, so thank you.
Tally, I am telling you, it's from the inside out. When people, it's like a person in sales. I mean, is Adi on this call? Adi Lydia?
Yes, I'm here.
She is. Oh,
Hey,
here she
for a
is.
minute. Can you come on?
I am here.
Let me
I'm
ask you something.
Yes.
What makes a client buy a house? What is it in the salesperson that makes the difference between a good agent and a not good agent?
I think people want to work with people that they like and they
Yep.
trust. So that's the first thing. Of course, they have to like the house, but I think the person that they're working with is key.
And when you say trust, what does that mean? It means that person feels like they're in control, right?
The person feels like there's, as a salesperson, someone looking out for them, watching out for their best interest.
Right. And that salesperson is in control, not easily.
Correct. Yes, definitely.
I
Mhm.
can't imagine any profession where success does not come to a person who is standing in their space, holding themselves firm. Yes, there are always idiots out there, 100%. There are going to be bosses, and there'll be female and male bosses. But please remember that Israeli chutzpah is not the same thing as the deep inner power that allows you to stand and say what you want to say without backing down. Stylistically, it's a very different culture. You're absolutely right. And you may find that you have to learn to use words that are more subtle. But that's not what people respond to. They respond to the clarity and certainty of your own inner anchoring. Anybody else?
So if no one has questions, I will ask the last questions. We all remember when you were talking on our trip on Shlom Bayit and we were talking about drinking water. We all drank a lot of water since we got from Israel. We were
Did
very
you?
good about it. But I think one of the most challenging things right now for all families staying together is Shlom Bayit.
Oh, yeah.
One of my girlfriends just told me the other day, when I hear him breathing next to me, I want to kill him. Okay? He's only breathing. We're not even fighting. The fact that he breathes makes me just want to kill him. So I was wondering if you can say some wisdom words. Your wisdom words, when we hear it from you, it's different, about Shlom Bayit.
Okay. So I would love to come back and do another one of these with you and give you 45 minutes on Shlom Bayit. I have so much to share. But, you know, when I was married about 8 or 10 years, my husband and I were fighting all the time. He's downstairs. He can validate this. And one day I said to him, "Do you have to breathe like that?" And he said, "Would you prefer I stopped entirely?" And I said, "Yes." This is like, the breathing is look, this is what I would suggest. I would suggest in this unusual time that you carve out wherever possible, time on your own. Maybe you could take turns with your spouse if there's a man in the house where you get to lock yourself in the bedroom away from the kids for an hour and a half. Like, it's got to be enough time that it could be a nap or a phone call or a full couple or 3 episodes of something on Netflix. You need time apart. The second thing that you can do, and if we're talking about drinking the water here, I mean, there's either going to be a huge baby boom or there's going to be a huge divorce boom at the end of this. It's really hard to know what it will be. Just remember, women have a sense of identity based on just being. We are mother, we are daughter, we're employee, we're employer, we are friend, we are all kinds of things. And our identity is a full amalgamation. It's a flower with a million petals. And if 1 or 2 or even 5 fall off, they're still there. But the majority of men, their identity comes entirely from what they do outside of the house. And they don't feel, they are drowning, freaking out, worried that they won't be able to provide, worried that they're in the way, worried that the money's going to fall away, worried that they won't make the mortgage, just like we are. But what they don't have that we have is a sense of self and identity outside of that. And we got to try and cut them some serious slack right now. Because aside from being annoying breathers and all of those other things, they are, imagine this was your son. And he got married, and he was doing the best he could, and he loved his wife, and she loved him. Maybe they weren't drinking the water as much as he wanted to, or she wanted to, or whatever. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of their lives together, this thing happened. And they had no sense of identity whatsoever anymore. And it was your son. How would you want his wife to treat him? As hard as we're working right now, girls, as difficult as it is, we have experience in multitasking. We know how to identify ourselves as more than just one thing, and they are losing their you-know-what. So a little compassion. And if you want, Tammy, Tal and I can arrange another time to come back and really give you a full 45 minutes on techniques for how to make
I think we can all benefit it, but right now I just see that it's 9 p.m. and we said we're going to do it an hour. I'm not sure, I mean, you were talking so you couldn't see, but in the chat, women that needed to leave kept like saying such nice warm words for you, like, only to hear your voice inspired me, to hear your kind words. Thank you so much. Here, someone just wrote, good idea for another session about Shlom Bayit. So I think we're going to do it again. We're going to talk about it and do it again. But for now, I truly want to thank you. As always, you're amazing. You gave us some sanity in this hour. Pleasure.
Thank you.
And I keep seeing like the messages in the chat. Thank you. Thank you. And we love you, Adrienne.
I love you.
We
sweetheart.
love
Thank you, Adrienne.
Good
We
night,
love you.
everybody.
And thank you so much.
Chag
And
Sameach
stay
לכולם.
safe, everybody. And Chag Sameach.
Chag
Chag
Sameach,
Sameach.
girls.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Bye, Tammy. Bye, Adrienne.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
זה מאוד. כל הכבוד.
כן, בואי נשאר שנייה.
אין הדרן.
לא די. יהיה עוד האמת כמה ימים.
כן. רגע, מתי...
יש לנו ביום שישי את הוורקשופ שהוא סולד אאוט.
סולד אאוט,
שלחתי לך.
שתי הסדנות סולד אאוט?
לא, הסדנה השנייה עדיין לא סולד אאוט.
אוקיי.
אבל זו כבר סולד אאוט. אנחנו שוקלים אולי אפילו לפתוח עוד אחת, כי יש לנו waiting list.
למי? לטלי כאילו?
לטלי, כן. אז אנחנו נראה, בואו נראה אולי נראה כמה יהיה waiting list, אבל בינתיים אני מתחילה לקבל פניות של אנשים שזה מאוד מאוד מעניין אותם.
מעולה, ומיכל, מתי אמרנו? ברביעי, נכון?
שנייה אחת.
רגע, מיכל.
מיכל, ב6 לאפריל.
בשישי.
אחת. אני לא יודעת מה קרה לזום שלי, אין לי שום דברים של הוסט.
שום שליטה? נורא מוזר.
נורא מוזר, אני שנים כאילו...
רואים שאת הוסט. רגע, את רוצה אולי להפסיק את ההקלטה?
כן, אני חושבת שכדאי.